Um, to start, we did this at an open house before. I'm not sure if we did it for the open house this past summer, but we had one in the spring. And I think it's useful to kind of remind ourselves and share out with others. Feel free to turn your mic back on and share out. When you think about an education for your child, um, or when your child's growing up, what would you hope for them?
Growth and confidence in themselves.
Okay, growth and confidence. I'm actually going to write these down. These might be worth coming back to.
A well-rounded good person can fit into where the niche where they want to be in society and in their work life and in their interests.
Nice. Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else want to share?
But I would say a lifelong learner, someone who continues to want to learn and just not burnt out, immediately.
All right, that seems to echo whenever we've asked this question, that is kind of you guys have hit on things that we hear often. And so I think if we could keep this in mind as we go through this presentation, it'll be helpful. Because I think we agree with you guys here. And so when we're looking at education, I think the first question is, how can we do this in the best way possible with what we might know up to this point? I was going to include a video in here, but man, it's really long. So I didn't add it in, but it's Dr. Naomi Fisher, and she is giving a presentation on self-directed learning. And part of that presentation is on the history of schooling and how schooling got started and how it, in many ways, runs counter to what we know in psychology and neuroscience, and that 25 to 30% of very well replicated science within human development and how that looks. And so one of the most foundational things that we look to as far as a child growing and learning, and not just a child, this could be an adult or senior, is, let's see if it'll work here. There we go. Self-determination theory. So I'm going to let Dr. Gina Riley, there's a lot of clips from her in this because this is actually what she studies, and she has an interesting background where she's an educational psychologist as well. So she trains teachers in public school, but she, quote unquote, unschooled her own son and does research on self-directed learning spaces.
You have to understand that intrinsic motivation and self-determination comes from within. So it's all about the child's intrinsic passions and intrinsic strengths and what the child wants to do. And so, of course, again, you can't force intrinsic motivation, although we'd love to, because all sorts of wonderful things come out of intrinsic motivation. But you can facilitate it as a parent. And what I usually use in terms of coaching and mentoring people with facilitation of intrinsic motivation is called self-determination theory.
Okay, so while we're pulling this back up, if you saw on that slide, there's 3 components to self-directed theory, and that is autonomy, connectedness, and competency. So those 3 factors have to be in place whenever we're thinking about self-determination theory. All right, so we'll get back to this now.
In order to facilitate intrinsic motivation. And you can do this in kids and you can do this in adults. And again, the key word here is facilitation. It's not forcing, it's not teaching, it's true facilitation.
Okay, so those 2 aspects of creating a space where kids don't feel forced, right? A couple things happens there. You take away autonomy and you can risk the connection. And we'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so these are the benefits. She's going to speak briefly to the benefits of the long-term outcomes of self-determination theory.
Determination in one's child. Why is this important?
It's amazing. I mean, the benefits are you have more enthusiasm and happiness, right? You have love of learning, love of skill. And who doesn't want that?
Right.
Everyone wants their kids to embrace things and be excited about things and live life with that sort of excitement. Mm-hmm. So the biggest benefit is you have happier kids.
Yeah. Yeah, who probably do better academically in the long run.
Yeah, who do better throughout, right? Like academically, socially, emotionally.
Right.
And I think social emotional portion is just as important as that academic portion.
Determination of.
So that statement on the academics, I think it's worth speaking to just for a second, because within her research and Peter Gray's research, there's a couple other people within research who found the same thing. It's those who choose the academic route, they do extremely well. So again, with self-determination theory and self-directed learning, it really depends on what the child's getting into, right? So if I'm going to run a business, those skills are highly mastered within that context. Okay, so this is how humans learn and develop and thrive. So what type of environment then is going to allow that to be optimal, right? What's going to give them those three components we were just talking about? So there's different models in education, right? We could be looking at a behavioral model where we control the behaviors of the kids, or a cognitive model where we try to take them through a process that has a certain type of thinking and thinking about topics or learning in a particular way. But then there's a constructivist model that really, and it's a more recent model, but it has a lot of good research behind it. And so it really says whatever you want the individual to take on, whether it's values or skills, you need to fully immerse them within that context. So an example might be civics, right? I remember in school, I learned a lot about the importance of freedom and the Constitution and, you know, the three branches of government. But it stayed abstract, right? It stayed through learning about these people through books and videos and making sure I, you know, still had to ask to go to the restroom. So there might have been some environmental things that didn't actually support what I was being taught. So in a space like the Grove, that might look like school meeting. So attitudes on values and democracy, right? So in this school meeting, you have a group of kids who are proposing different things, having discussions about those things, and then voting. And each child gets a vote within the group, and then majority, you know, that's the proposal either passes or may not. Just one example of them living those values that we see in society. Another might be scientific and critical thinking. So Dr. Gina Riley speaks to this in other places where really self-directed learning and self-determination theory kind of flip it. So they start generally. So these kids building a rocket, you know, testing their own hypothesis of what will happen, what will the wind do, where can we place it to where we can try to catch it, whatnot. That's very high levels of scientific thinking, excuse me. So in time, if they have an interest in going into science, that's when you'll see them going into the specifics of maybe it's chemistry or biology or those things, right? So it goes from general and then it goes down into the specific skills. This is just a really cool picture, I thought, of student engagement and just seeing all that's going on. So you've got Chloe and Nora doing something that they're very immersed in. And then across the way, you've got Ivan and Wesley, and then a nice component of age mixing here with Isabel and Evelyn. And then I'm not sure who this is with Ezra, but they're all deeply engaged with whatever they're doing here. And so that is definitely a good sign. That's kind of an assessment piece we're looking for. So not so much this passive experience, but a very deeply engaged one. Okay, so we talked about the environment or the space in which we want to provide self-determination theory to thrive. So what is the role of adults then? In really our role and what the science shows as best teaching is teaching through modeling. All right, so we'll talk about the grounding values here in a second, because that's really the foundation of all of this. This is just the science that gives us the best practices of what to use. But I have an audio clip here, and I'm going to let Dr. Tran set this up of what was going on in this situation. So this will be Olivia jumping into the kitchen area asking you, what's 17 minus 2?
So if you minus 2 off of 17, what would it be?
Probably more like 19 then.
After 18, it goes to 19.
Did we count to 19? I don't remember 19.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59,
70.
60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 78, no, 76, 77, 78, 79. Guess what it's gonna be?
81.
80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89.
91.
90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. So,
Okay.
what is it if you subtract 2 off of 17?
2 plus 17.
No, it's minus.
2 minus 17?
Yes.
2 minus 17. Wouldn't that be like a negative 15?
No. You're taking away 2 from 17.
Oh.
It would be 15.
15 minus 2, it would be 15 kids left. 15 kids tomorrow. Oh,
Okay, so I'm going to let Dr. Tran there kind of explain that process and what he was doing there.
So the process itself is happening. And I don't want to interfere with the process. It's important that Olivia thinks this through. So I try very much when I'm with a child not to make it about me. And sometimes when we think that we're teaching and it's a moment, an opportunity for us to teach the child, it could be potentially imposing and disrupting. So anytime we interrupt, we disrupt. And she has to be in the position of teaching to be able to empower her. This gives her a sense of confidence and even clarity. My job is just to remain calm and reflect. I don't need to do anything more than that. And in doing so, giving the child the opportunity to teach me, putting her in the position of responsibility. This expedites her maturity. When the maturity is expedited, we're going to see a child who's quite empowered. Not overpowered, but empowered. This is a game that we've been playing for months now. This addition, subtraction. And it's an opportunity for me to be engaged. So there are many things that are happening that that the child is in the process of doing that is helping me too, but it's helping her to develop. And what is developing is and what I'm trying to do as we're facilitating this process, and I keep this in mind, the brain. The brain is developing, so I don't need to do anything more. Now, I make comments and statements only to challenge her, and that was I was in the position to get her to be more thoughtful. So that's why I was providing the wrong answers.
And I think once we get to our grounding values, it was, when you approach it that way with questions, it can teach humility and those things as well. So it's just a neat example of what we're going for. And we have a couple more coming up here, but here's an example, and I want you guys to chime in. Here's an example of what not to do. And please tell me which part. It might be the whole video.
Shut out the sign.
Okay, I'll play it one more time. Go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in.
Shut out the sign.
All right, what should I have done differently there?
Was that you speaking to Evelyn?
That was me.
And what did you say? I couldn't quite make it out. Sorry.
No worries. So I said, ooh, it shot out the side, but it was, very clown-like. Would you have done anything differently there, Mary?
I probably would have done worse. So I don't know that I would have done anything better.
Okay, let's see if we can go to the next slide. So I want you to watch this video. Oh, and mind you too, you guys didn't see this, but right after I turned it off, Evelyn turned to me and said, Paul, and I'll share more in a minute, but here's another example. This is Dr. Tran is sitting here now. So any other guesses with what was the difference between that video and the first video?
From what I noticed, it seemed like from your response, Paul, it was as a way of caution, like, oh no, kind of be careful. While Dr. Trans was one of like faith and silence, with them trying to figure it out and experience those moments. Yeah,
Lyndon, thanks for chiming in there. So again, you didn't see the full video of Ellen and I interacting, but there was a lot of times she was struggling and I might try to jump in to provide an idea. And we're comfortable enough now where she would tell me to stop. But right there, it's, every time I said something, I was breaking that flow. And even the risk taking, making a mistake, having perseverance to, jump back. Do you want to speak more to what's going on here?
Yes, and my perception was different when she played with me. What I was observing was a child who was in the process of resilience, adapting to her situation, trying to figure out how to put this maze together. By the way, that is what she is exercising and the gameplay that she was engaged in is called matrix reasoning. Now, it's easy for me to maintain silence because I'm seeing it very different. I needed to see her fail, and she did quite a bit before she was able to formulate a proper response with the blocks. And the reason why is because that's when anti-fragility starts to develop, which then can lead to resilience. So it's powerful just to sit back and observe and recall what I said. To interrupt is to disrupt. Her brain is working. It is developing. It's making neuronal connections right before our very eyes. This is a powerful process and a critical process that cannot be disrupted. So anytime we disrupt that process, we're actually disrupting the connection that's being formulated. And the more she stays on top of the job, if you will, the longer she plays without the disruption, the stronger the connection. Neuroplasticity is happening as it is occurring in that moment. So it needs to be preserved. She does not need my take on that. She's going to figure it out. And even if she doesn't, it's great to see her fail too. I want to see her fail because I want to see how far she can go. I want to see how strong her resilience is.
Are there any questions up to this point based off of what we've shared thus far? Okay, please feel free at any point if there's something on your mind as we go through this. So all of those components together, I think this is a really nice quick video of kind of those learning fundamentals of self-directed learning from Dr. Peter Gray.
So the first condition is a clear understanding that education is the child's responsibility. When children know that they're responsible for their education, they take that responsibility. When they believe, they're led to believe that somebody else is responsible for their education and all they have to do is do what they're told, then they tend to do that in the minimal way and they don't take responsibility for their education. Second condition, unlimited opportunity to play, explore, and pursue your own interests. Unlimited time, not an hour a day, not 2 hours a day, unlimited time. It takes time to try out different things. It takes time to get bored, to overcome boredom. Can't interrupt that with bells and telling people constantly what to do and expect people to really develop a passion. 3, opportunity to play with the tools of the culture, to really play with the tools of the culture. In a hunter-gatherer culture, those would be bows and arrows and knives and fire and digging sticks. In our culture, of course, the main tool is a computer. And it's not surprising that children everywhere in our culture love to play with computers. They know in their bones that this is the tool of the culture, and they need to spend a lot of time with it. So it becomes, in a sense, an extension of their own body. Access to a variety of caring adults who are helpers, not judges. How important that last part is. Helpers, not judges. The last person you want to go to help you learn something is somebody who's evaluating you. You're nervous about that person. That person is a person you go to in the frame of mind of trying to impress that person with how much you know, not to say, I really don't know this and I would like some help. Free age mixing among children and adolescents are absolutely key to the school. The school would not work if it were children all the same age, because children don't have much to learn from others who are the same age. They learn from children who are older and from children who are younger than themselves. 6, immersion in a stable, moral, democratic community. Communities in which every child knows that their ideas and their actions influence the others involved in the community. So they're growing up in a setting where they feel responsible not just for themselves, but for the community within which they are developing.
Okay, so we're going to move into the grounding values, and we have a game. So in our mission statement, we have a part that says cultivating values that withstood the test of time, which is quite the claim to make, especially if you have humility as one of those values. So here's the game we're going to play, and please chime in. We want your participation here. We won't force it, but. Oh, actually, before we get there, I'm going to have Dr. Tran give a brief overview, because you guys have heard this before. They're very important, but yeah, an overview of these grounding values.
Yeah, so consciousness is a particular, it's a brand of, it's kind of an awareness, but it is a more sophisticated form of awareness that take into consideration regarding anything and everything that comes within the purview of that awareness. So a conscious individual may display aspects or elements of, let's say, patience or compassion, gratitude, humility. Oh, by the way, these grounding rules pertain to us. Now, there are aspects, or all 4 of these actually components or elements are also being taught, and a lot of it is being taught through modeling. But it is very important that the CCs, the conscious collaborators, hold on to these concepts and traits and practice them in the context of relation. So humility would be your capacity to recognize that you can be fallible. That's an important process, because humility leads to greater, deeper growth of self. Wisdom, it says understanding our place and impact. I think this is very important. There are aspects of wisdom. So to display that for the CC may look something like patience. And should a child challenge us, then it becomes more patience. So wisdom contains many elements, many other elements as well, like deep regard, also deep regard for the child here. And then there's compassion. Compassion is one of those crucial traits to have. It is my belief it is one of 3 among 700 human traits that are needed to be able to relate to other people and the world around us. It leads to, or in order to have compassion, I believe we need 2 processes happening. One is metacognition, our ability to think about our thoughts in relation to other people. And then there's meta empathy. So this is more than just empathy, where you're trying to understand the other person by walking into the other person's shoes. But meta empathy is doing just that, but you actually feel what the other person's feeling. So if the other person is suffering, you are deeply impacted by that suffering. So the point in all of that, the point in compassion is when we are listening to the child, in the process of listening, are we showing compassion? I.e., do we recognize ourselves in the context of this relationship, and are we offering kindness? I.e., as we are in the midst of this relationship or existing in the context of this relationship, are we showing kindness to the child?
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're just going to take one component. We could have taken any of these values, and we're going to play a game. So we're going to take compassion. So I have a quote here. This is a historical figure. I'll give you a hint. This first, I think 5 or 6 are religious figures. All right. And so here we go. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so who said this? Anybody?
Jesus.
That is correct. Was that Courtney? Was that you?
Absolutely.
Hey, you got a point. Okay. Love is the bridge between you and everything. Any takers? Rumi. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Any guesses? No?
I already
Yeah.
answered these, so I'm not going to do it again. I'll give everybody else a chance.
Okay, all right, Marcy. So that's the Buddha. Where there is love, there is life. Okay, this is a more recent figure, but we're still in the religious context here. Gandhi. Friendship is the only thing that matters. So now we're going ancient times. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then this last one is very recent. Keep the love bit. So this was the staunch atheist and secularist, Christopher Hitchens. Okay, he was a journalist. Oh, Mary's on mute. She's saying she knew this one. A good try, Mary. Okay, so the point is, no matter what your background is or your belief system might be, there's something that's really deep within humans, right? And this transcends whatever culture you might be coming from. And so that's what we mean when these values transcend time and really cultures themselves. So that's why they're so important to us. Okay, so we're going to move away from kind of the philosophy. Well, actually, we're going to give examples of what it looks like. Now, this is just one component. This is another component of the science. We're going to just focus on play. We could be looking at servant leadership. We've talked a little bit about things like school meeting, right? We have offerings, all sorts of different things. So, but we're just going to focus on play. So, Dr. Tran, could you give us kind of a general overview of play, and then we'll get into the specifics?
Yes, if you've heard me speak before on play, you know I refer to as play consciousness. That's wholly what consists of the child's consciousness. It's about play, and it is very crucial. It is a vital part of the child's developmental process that helps to contribute to emotional, mental, intellectual, psychological, social, relational growth. So this is very crucial. Now, if you've heard, again, if you heard me speak before, I have said once upon a time, if my child could play all day, I would allow it, to which I do. I allow her to play all day if she wants, because it is in the child, whether the child is 0 years old or 18 years old, the most effective and most powerful educational tool known for children. It is the reason why we do play therapy with kids, because that's where they cultivate self-awareness. And I think I heard earlier, the first question when we first started, a parent say that they would like their child to feel confidence, or and that's what play does. There's resilience, there's emotional competence, stress relief, social skills building, conflict resolution, problem solving. What is essentially happening in play, if you see the picture right there that's taken, this is phenomenal to me, because in my eyes, we're watching in real time the brain develop. Play supports the healthy brain development more than anything we could even say to the child. So my point, stop the preaching and the teaching. Let them play. Let them play.
Okay, so there's a really fantastic book, in my opinion, Gardener and the Carpenter, is written by Dr. Alison Gopnik. She's a researcher and has been doing it since I think the 70s, child development and such. And so a lot of her book is on play and the different stages of play and development. And so we're going to break that down a little bit. One thing to note is you'll see kids, right, no matter what age, play in these different modes and ways of playing. These are just kind of general things you tend to see within age groups. So starting with, 6 to 8 year olds, game play and cooperative play. Early on, right, they're going from kind of solo play to a little bit more cooperative play. Now it's getting a little bit more sophisticated, right? They're incorporating rules and those things, but you still see a lot of imagination in those things.
Thinking is playing as they get older. At about age 13 and on, we're going to see more logic and reasoning and rationalization as they go back and forth with their peers. And it's more than just talking and having conversation. They'll play with the idea that life is meaningless or meaningful. They'll play with the idea of politics or religion and so on. It's all play. It's a wonderful process.
So here's, we're going to the park and just show some of the cooperative play going on here over here in the wagon. They were all taking turns pulling each other, as it was several blocks to get to the park. Once we got there and they hit the swings, I think they were either some sort of like pterodactyls or birds, but it turned into this game where they were all a flock together. So just building on that social connection and how to socialize and communicate and collaborate with each other, all the while developing this identity and confidence and right, this authenticity that we're looking for. Okay, so they move into middle childhood. So you're going to get more cooperative team, but also competitive play. So it's with the team play, it becomes more organized and again, sophisticated with different roles and layers of things going on. You start to see an emphasis on skills. So Dr. Gopnik talks about at a certain point, they start to really try to master certain skill sets, within playful activity. So it might be guitar or singing, or like Dr. Tran was saying, even debating each other or jumping into conversations about things. Okay, some examples. So we've got Ivan and Wesley doing Legos together. One thing you'll notice through all of this, which Dr. Gina Riley, Naomi Fisher, Peter Gray, they talk about how play incorporates what we would think of as traditional academics, and it gives them a really strong foundation. So that video clip of Dr. Tran and Livy, she was giving a math problem, but then she was counting to 100. Who knows why, but she counted to 100. I couldn't help but think all of the different components of leadership and communication, all those things. I mean, that's, I've been in a standard school setting as a teacher. That's worth like 50 lessons of trying to get a kid to understand something within a 2-minute clip. So I think what's really cool, you see Javier doing some D&D. He often takes 15 to 20 minutes to do some background research before he starts the game. So he's reading a lot from his book, applying that into the storyline. There's tons of talking going on in the play. So you'll see a lot of the foundational academics being set to where no matter what they choose, once they get into their teen years, whether it's college or, just traveling or getting into business right away, they know they have a foundation where attaining those skills is very possible. Here we have Nora helping Chloe out at the ice rink. The cool thing about play is it really enhances, the ability and having the skills of taking risks and taking healthy risks. And so, I mean, it can be scary to ice skate. And if you know how to ice skate, I see Lyndon here. She's also maybe one of those who took some real risks and got out there. So, but right, the support, relationships deepening, learning to count on others and learning how to learn, right? Learning how to go through this process is a big thing. And we'll see more of that later in a clip. On the left, there's a board game amongst food, and they're all cooperating and figuring out its hues and cues game. So you have to think of a word that gives them a hint for the color. Anyways, very fun to watch. And you'll see the age mixing again. Livy's learning a lot from the older kids in the space. But even Nora and Fern, right, in the kind of middle age with Jay and Isabel there. So, and vice versa. The older's learning to be more patient and kind in that way. Just another example of academics coming into the play. And it gets a little bit, it blurs the line between work and play, which is actually what we're looking for. When we think of something like a meaningful life and profession, something that you have real interest and passion in, those people talk about how it feels like play still often. And so, giving these kids kind of that tool to navigate like what feels right for me, when you have a childhood of practicing that, I think that's your standard when you become an adult. So it's pretty neat. On the right, they were doing a Valentine's Day list. And so this is all the food. I think I wrote down the food maybe as they dictated it to me. And then they put the price down and budgeted to see if we had enough money. So just an example there. So as Dr. Tran was talking about, so getting into adolescent 12 plus. So now they're doing multiple player games. They might be talking about, different things and exploring ideas, but this is where they're really starting to try to master different skills, which we see all the time within the space, whether it's writing, storytelling, guitar, cooking, even just being leaders. We have an example here in a minute. We'll show you that. So here you go. You got Jesse and Isabel. I can't remember what they were discussing. I think it was politics maybe, but you can tell there's kind of a back and forth going on here. In my world, I'm imagining Isabel's thinking, you're not hearing what I'm saying here, Jesse, but I don't know. And then of course, we've got music going on with Beckett and Jesse. Examples of, the kids are cooking these things from scratch. One thing that's become very big in the space is making our own bread and dough with flour and water and whatever else they do from scratch. I don't really know, actually. I'm just existing on the side. And then Mason, he's been trying out different steaks and different food recipes. Again, incorporating, those components of math, fractions and all that stuff. But those things are surface level. That's not actually the deep stuff we're looking for. It's more along these lines. And of course, taking on those grounding values. But so going into adulthood, like I mentioned, Gina Riley, Peter Gray, in their research, what they found is whether it was graduates from democratic schools or homeschoolers who were more unschooled, high life satisfaction. So really showing the benefits towards mental health when you have self-determination theory within the context of education and learning. But then finding things they were really passionate about, or these things they played with a lot. And sometimes the play doesn't unfold into a profession, but it might open those doors into things you might want to go into. Dr. Gina Riley has a really cool story about her own son with that. So So we're going to have our first graduate actually this year. And I think Jesse's a good example. Dr. Tran has known Jesse a lot longer than I have, but ever since I met him, he was always into mechanical stuff, cars, motorcycles. Even at the bowling alley, he's working on, however the balls make it back up to you after you bowl, and pins get set. So he's always had this love of mechanics, and came in and, I don't know how far into the year it was, but then he decided, which initially, if I remember correctly, there was no way this was on in his future or in his picture. He wanted to do dual enrollment with Sheridan College. And really, it was a process of him doing the research, talking to the advisors, and figuring out, like, I want to get a welding certificate, and then follow that up with a diesel certificate. So he's in the process of that now. It's been really cool to watch him take the responsibility and ownership of that. He lined up a time where I could go meet his professor. He's been talking about the different classes, bringing things in that he's been welding and working on, and teaching me a lot about the class itself. So all the while, just the amount of confidence you can see growing in him has been really, really quite amazing. I don't know, Dr. Tran, if you wanted to speak.
Yeah,
Jesse's story.
I am just in awe with what I have seen, especially early on when I first met Jesse. There were concerns, but this is I had not known Paul took this picture, but mechanics is his brand of play. Getting involved in fixing up engines. I believe this is his third motorcycle. He had 2 dirt bikes before that he had brought to show me. I thought it was just phenomenal. We were just out there, and I had him explain all the parts of the motorcycle, just to see where he. It was just a measure of his intelligence in relation to mechanics, but it was so playful in the way that he explained the parts of the motorcycle, and even knowing it to be aware of its function, as I again bear witness to this cognitive process as it was happening. Sure, it's a gimmick sometimes for me to get kids to try to teach me, but I really am curious as a measure of their independence and their cognitive, emotional maturity. And one way to determine that is to get them to play with me, but watch how they play. This is it. I think when Paul first showed me this picture, and which is recent, I couldn't help but to smile, because I think he's come to a point where through his play, he has developed into quite a mature young man.
Okay, we have a couple slides. I'm going to let you guys ask a few questions, and then we'll kind of go into the last portion of this. Just wanted to make a note on this. And really, I think the importance of this is to show how having the patience to let your child go through the process of this, self-directed learning experience, how crucial it is, and keeping that pressure off so that they can, play with different ideas and explore different things that they may want to explore. Because it turns out to be something you didn't even imagine could be the case. And I think Dr. Gina Riley has a really cool story about her own son we can talk a little bit more about, but you'll hear some of it within here. Now, there's a couple terms she uses. Laziness is one of them here. Boredom and laziness, talking about the importance of letting that process take hold. We actually don't see laziness as maybe how most people would say laziness. In fact, I think laziness is, Dr. Tran, right? It's a judgment, right? More than anything else. So really, there's a lot going on within the mind when a kid is just sitting and pondering and ruminating and imagining and whatever they might be doing that we can't see, can't get into. But if you just sit back and let that unfold, it's quite amazing to see what it can turn into. But here's a short clip, and then I'll explain the picture.
Times of real sort of boredom, laziness. But Ben will say the thing that he learned about unschooling was that boredom and laziness are kind of a normal part of the learning process. that when you're bored, you learn to find something to do, right? You can't be bored for an extended amount of time. No one is bored for 8 hours. By the 6th hour, you found something to do. And it's just really waiting that out, whether it be hours or days or years. Some people call that the deschooling process. Some people call that just a phase. Some people call that adolescence. But along with the levels of high intrinsic motivation, there was also a lot of waiting out of boredom and a waiting out of maybe less than optimal learning activities.
Okay, so that's where we might disagree a little bit with Gina Riley at the end, where she was saying, not as useful learning activities or whatnot. That might be more of like a doing rather than being. But I think if we think about the different stages of play, a lot of times, right? I think we remember it was when landlines were around, but I remember all of my sisters being in their room for hours on the telephone, doing nothing but, doing whatever they do in their little journals and talking with friends. So it's a real time where, especially in those early teen years, they're learning a lot about what relationships mean and look like, right? And so they're playing with those concepts a lot. And it can look a certain way because we might have expectations that it should look like something else. But to try to let go of that and realize, they're, I guess you can't promise this, but I think most, when given the freedom to do so, right, they're not going to stay in that mode their whole life. They're going to take that understanding and then apply it to that next process as it unfolds.
I think it's important also to recognize a form of play. I think there are 7 different types of play, but one I'm about to refer to is called isolated play. We might consider that solitude or isolation, but isolated play is very crucial for the child because it becomes an opportunity for the child to learn about themselves. There's a journey happening when they're isolated and they're just sitting there thinking about themselves. We call it lazy, but the child's mind is always wandering. So we have to provide the child that opportunity.
So this was a picture from the beginning of the year. I think you can see the leaves in the background still. And so this was it was a brainstorming session for a story that they were working on. And it stayed alive for a couple weeks. They started creating, maybe 3 weeks or so. They started creating different characters and those things. It turned into like a story, and then all of a sudden there was digital art going on and actually, hand sketching of characters going on. But then it kind of faded off, at least so I thought. I think a few of them stayed at it, kind of behind, again, when they have a device, it might be hard to know exactly what's going on. But just recently, I came into the sunroom and noticed that they were working on the story once again. And even Olivia sharing that, some of the challenges as far as creating the story and how the characters were going to fit in and those things. So they're all kind of working on this together. So this is a clip from the.
Really cold.
I'm going to pause it real quick. I don't know if you can tell, but Isabel has a laptop and there is a lot of words on that laptop. And right after this video, Nora leaned over and I was in there for another 5 minutes and she was reading and then giving feedback in this back and forth while I was in there. And then I left and they were still working on it. And just beyond them, you've got Chloe and Fern reading back and forth something. I'm not sure if it has the same story, but it's just the engagement. That's another thing I'd love to speak to is, as a teacher, you want this level of engagement. You don't want the passive kind of apathetic, just getting through it so that I can get to the next thing. There's real deep engagement going on. So I'll let this finish out.
Big thing next. What's going on? Listen, what's going on?
Just an example of, whatever it might be, just being patient with it. And then whenever they have a chance and there's a park on offer, they go. So you're seeing a real balance within, just things they're getting into and finding these different things about, what they want to do and that intrinsic motivation. That's the biggest thing, right? They're cultivating that. It's not this extrinsic thing of punishment or I'm going to get a reward out of it. Okay, so another example, again, this was earlier on. These guys are trading Pokemon cards. I think there was baseball cards Ivan brought in, and it died out for a while. It died out for a while. So here's a quick clip to give it some background again.
Playing Nintendo. But mixed with that, he also had these really cool interests. And these interests really followed him. So it was geology for a long time. It was coin collecting for a really long time. And that's where he got really into history. He got into a phase where he played bowling and sports for a really, really long time. And all I kept thinking was, oh my gosh, all this kid does all day is either practice golf or go to the bowling alley. Like, what is going to happen here? And then when he was 15, he got into guitar, and that ended up being a lifelong love. And his bachelor's was in classical guitar. His master's was in music theory. So again, like, this is not a kid who is intrinsically motivated every hour of the day. Sometimes your intrinsic interests, die down. Some days are filled with TV and video games. And I know that's really hard for parents.
Okay, so it speaks to a lot of what she already spoke to. And then a few months later, the cards came back out, and they wanted to find out what the value might be of these different cards. So they're taking it to just a card shop, and we've got a contact here who kind of has been an expert in the field of like knowing the value of cards and whatnot. And so they were asking him, how much is this card worth, and those things. And they had like organized their cards into different values and had done the math to find out how much money they have and all those things. So really cool to see them get out into the community and just meet, different people as well. Okay, so we're about to kind of transition to the last part of the presentation, but this was a trip to McDonald's that Dr. Tran took. And I think it's a good example of kind of the assessment we're looking for as far as the grounding values being, taken on and embodied and actually lived. And then all those other factors I think parents would want as well. So Dr. Tran, you want to?
Yeah, so they asked if I could take them to McDonald's. As we arrived, I purposely took my time to get out of the car, intentionally allowing them to take the lead. So the girls got out. I walked behind them. They entered McDonald's, and they immediately got in line. I stood behind all of them, and Libby said, "Can you go find us a table?" I think this is fantastic, leading the way. So I found this table right here, the booth, and two tables. I was sitting on the third table. I didn't have to tell them I found a table. I had confidence that they knew where they were going to go. They made their orders. They came and sat down, and we were just engaging, talking back and forth about the meaning of the universe. Not really, but to the topics they were talking about, that is their universe. So I went along with it. And then we had this person come up to us and said to us, asked what school we were from. And I told that person we are from The Grove, Thee, The Grove. Anyway, but she responded with, "Your kids are so polite and well-mannered." So it's interesting because, again, they were leading the process. I didn't have to tell them, but then I was quiet. This is the example part. You can see where I was sitting. Livy and Evelyn would ask me questions or have me respond. I would actually, in a very calm tone and quiet tone, respond in kind. And we could feel their tone and voice adjusting too. And then at the end, we were there about 40 minutes in. I thought we should get back. Instead of telling them it's time to get back, I stood up and I started to wipe my part of the table. And it was Isabel who said, "Oh, it's time to go. Let's clean up." and they started to clean up the table. And I walked around and threw my trash away as they were still cleaning the table. And then I was waiting near the trash, and they walked towards the trash. They threw their stuff away. And at that point, Nora asked if she could lead the way. And I said, absolutely. So there's a lot happening here that is happening that as I was listening to conversation, one of the things that stood out to me was the level of maturity. I noticed that once in a while, for instance, Nora would look over at me and Isabel and Fern from time to time. So I found that this interesting. I think it shows the impact of our presence and the meaning of our presence. If we are a particular way, going back to the grounding values, maintaining consciousness, wisdom, humility, and compassion. We reflect that, and they will respond in kind as well.
I think it's, it can be seen as trivial, but the impact of just hearing this and then seeing the picture on top of that, that internal locus of control, right, that they are cultivating within themselves. And we just know that that is, like, that just is, it supports mental health a lot. So here's an example on a Saturday. Well, okay, so it would have been, I think, mid last week, towards the end of last week, or it might have been just prior to that. I don't know. But Jay had approached me and mentioned, we've made some changes to how we do jobs at the end of the day or do cleanup. And through school meeting, kids were proposing these different ideas, and they were working better, but not quite to the degree that they should have been as far as having a clean space at the end of the day. And so Jay came up and basically, mentioned how we weren't there yet and we needed to do something differently, and really took control of the situation. And though I wanted to get defensive, I was, I suppose, wise enough in the moment not to. And man, I'm glad I didn't, because it just unfolded into this amazing learning opportunity for Jay. So we have servant leadership as a main component here at the school. So we're constantly putting kids into a leadership position, but then modeling or asking questions that get them to start taking on those skill sets of what a servant leader would be, whether it be active listening, empathizing, clear communication with others, modeling how they would want, if they're managing a space, how they'd want the people that they're managing to do their jobs and whatnot. So after I think we were in school together for about an hour of talking about different things that could happen, me mostly just listening and writing things down, notes down. This is what Jay sent, I think on a Saturday or a Sunday. And this doesn't even capture, I think there's 3 more texts I could have shared. So this just goes on so the thinking that was going on here that Jay went through, and just the organizing all these things. And then in the beginning to share, I'm sending you the job list so you can prep 17 jobs, 16 kids plus you. Because I had a role within this of getting materials for the job board that we were going to create, and where Jay thought it could go in the space. And then even planning out Monday's school meeting of how this might unfold. We have to get it voted in. We can't just push this through. So anyways, it's just, the amount of really just being a business entrepreneurial person here is, there's a reason in a lot of podcasts and in the literature, you'll see that it's like a PhD in business when you go to a school like this, because it just has so many opportunities for kids to not only, step into the lead, but actually see change happen. And that again goes to confidence building and then just empowering any student. And the opportunity is fantastic. So I wanted to share that example. I'm just going to do one of these as we're kind of getting close to the end here, and wanted you guys to have time for question and answers. But somebody had mentioned lifelong learning. and being able to figure out, the skill sets needed. This is what a model like this really leads to.
And I think that's important to think about, right? Everything in traditional school goes very fast. We have lesson plans that we have to get through. We have learning that we have to get through. We have unit plans that span weeks and months that we have to get through. And so in traditional school, there's not a lot of time for thinking or intuitive learning or exploratory learning or metacognition. And when we talk about a self-directed learning environment, those things that all my traditional public school teachers crave, the time to explore, the time to gain metacognitive skills, the time to work on social emotional learning, it's all there in this self-directed learning environment. And that's really a gift. And so I think, definitely the two realms can learn from each other. But I think when you talk about self-directed learning, the gift of self-directed learning is your kids come out knowing how to learn.
I think I'll save this for the questions portion. These are common things that people wonder about. And would like to talk about tech use, hopefully briefly here, so you guys get an idea. I'm going to skip this video. Dr. Gina Riley's just talking about how in their studies, homeschoolers and kids who are very avid gamers, just at a high percentage went into the computer science fields, whatever that might be, and found a lot of success there. So again, if you think about play and kind of the things we've talked about with self-directed learning and how that unfolds and how they build, their skills based off of things they're learning, it makes sense that they would go into these fields that really are, I think in that video where Peter Gray talks about it is the tool of the culture, right? So yes, a tech addiction is real, and we have to watch for that and mitigate those things when problems are happening. But at the same time, I think all of us here, we're using it right now, right? And all of us here probably use it most of the day just to do whatever we're doing. Some of us not, and you see that in the space as well. There's kids who won't even touch it, which is totally fine. We support whatever they're going to go for. But there is definitely, from our point of view, there's a stigma there of how it's a waste of time and how I think we may want to pause and think about before we jump to that conclusion and try to interact with our kids with judgment. Just think about those things. So we see in the space gaming, the 4 C's. I'm guessing you guys have heard of this, maybe not, but it's critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So those are like the main things that in the workforce people are looking for within different fields. So that other things are like digital art, writing and storytelling, socially connecting. Man, Fern at home, and Mary, you could speak to this more too. She's probably got 3 or 4 really close friends, one that we're going to go visit this summer, and she's never even met them in person, which sounds, as I say that sounds terrifying, but they're of the same age and we've gotten to know them and we're going to get to know the parents. And it's provided a really beautiful opportunity. Now they're doing Duolingo on weekends, on Saturdays, right? Doing like math and Korean. So all these things you wouldn't expect, we're seeing those things happen. Here's one example. So we've got a kid in the space who, he'll have sometimes the volume on full blast, and there'll be 6 videos of that feeling as an adult of like, man, what are you getting out of this? And then he'll hit one like this.
The word blossom contains the word bloom, and within destruction, there lies ruin. Today, I'm talking about kangaroo words that contain synonyms, little baby versions of themselves within their pouches, their spellings. Precipitation, rain. Substandard, bad. Dearly departed, dearly dead. There are also twin kangaroo words that contain 2 synonyms of themselves. For example, the word deteriorate contains both die and rot. Chariot contains car and cart. But the most famous is the grand kangaroo word, a word that contains a synonym that also contains a synonym. For example, alone contains lone, and lone contains one. Anti-kangaroo words contain an antonym of themselves. For example, here is in there, Inside a friend, you can find a fiend. Whoa, was that a threat or a treat? Oh, guys, no, I thoroughly counted. Or maybe I roughly counted. Now, I've been trying to find my own types of kangaroo words. Like, I want to find a word that contains both an antonym and a synonym of itself. So far, I've just found one, close-mouthed. It contains both mute and loud. Oh, but listen to this. Lashing a bongy mothciliate shelf. Now, I just made that word up. It doesn't mean anything, and yet it contains a synonym of itself.
Okay, so that gives you an idea. And I mean, these are happening often. So whether it's history with this particular kid, Mason, it's history or science or this type of stuff with language. And then it often leads to like 10 minutes of him teaching about whatever he's learning there and testing out some things and making statements where he's like, actually, I may have to look that up. So kids practice all sorts of stuff. Cursive writing. Libby was pumped about that. Okay, I have you can't see the other two kids in this. They're in some sort of VR world together. But in a video earlier, you could probably hear the background noise when Evelyn was trying to do her tower. That's often what you'll hear, right? So they're talking, communicating, telling each other what to do. They have to negotiate and communicate in a way where they're not going to make each other upset. That's the beauty of play, right? They'll want to keep the play going, so they have to self-regulate. And so, yeah, keep this picture in mind as we move forward into the last part of this. Javi's kind of our IT guy. Here he's helping Buck. They're doing a Minecraft world, which was most of the school was involved in, which led to a whole campaign on Jackson and Ezra running to be king. I still have notes that when they were debating and proposing that they be voted on, them reasoning why they should be the person. And so it led into this whole dynamic thing of social engagement and learning together. So again, communication, collaboration, this is the tool of not only the future, but right now. They're learning it at a high degree. You probably have the same experience I do, where all of these kids have to troubleshoot things for me, whether it's my cell phone or laptop. And I don't know who taught them. It wasn't us. So in Minecraft, there's so many math components to the game. It's crazy if you jump in there and actually play it with them. So up here you have the coordinates, and they're constantly checking those coordinates and trying to navigate to each other or away from each other or a certain land point. And to where, right, they're writing it down, passing it to each other, making sure if they're going to work on it that night, you know, to leave whatever chest is at this location, those items. So even we talk about digital literacy a lot. I think it was a week ago, there was a half-hour conversation. I think I had asked the questions like, is Roblox dangerous? And then it spilled into this whole conversation of it's more about certain games you want to avoid. It's not so much the people you can just block as far as predators out there and whatnot, and talking about, you know, red flags, what to look out for. And it was dynamic. It was really cool. I think another example of we don't have to explicitly teach these things, especially when we have grounding values that they are, you know, living each day. They feel the kindness. And when you feel good, you want to do good amongst your community and other people. So when they're critically thinking, they're doing it in the mode of, how do I spread more good? This is a game where on the TV, there was an AI video or a picture and a real video or picture. And then they were trying to decipher which one was real and fake. And then we even talked about how do you know this? What do we do when AI gets better? How do we do this in ethical ways? You know, it wasn't to that level of how do you do this in ethical ways, but, you know, how do we be kind when we use AI and those things? So you see this within, you know, the World Economic Forum report as well. So I'm going to show you the key takeaways, but you'll notice it's, you know, some of those traditional skills, which are still important. Kids are going to need those. But again, this model has been showing for over 100 years that kids learn these skills and do really well in life. And it's even more important that they have this environment that helps them cultivate adaptability and being flexible and creative and having those human-centric values. As AI is coming on and, you know, Sure, certain writing things may not be that great yet, but I use it quite a bit to help myself with research and those things. And I mean, it's, I think we can all see kind of how things are changing in a way. It's hard to know what will happen, but soft skills are difficult to automate. And those are really important to be having our kids learn. So key trends, skills over degrees. So employees are looking more towards skill-based hiring over formal qualifications. The lifelong learning, what somebody was mentioning here, is super crucial with the speed of these things rapidly changing, just having that ability to learn how to learn. And then our grounding values, this human-centric focus. Okay, so this is the Microsoft AI CEO. There's as much as far as I know, there's a lot of debate. This might be in 15 years. This guy has a different point of view as far as when this stuff comes.
You talk about superintelligence. Most of your rivals talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence. Explain the difference between AGI and superintelligence.
I prefer the definition that focuses first on what would it take to build a system that could achieve most of the tasks that a regular professional in a workplace goes about on a daily basis. Think of it as a professional grade AGI.
How close are we?
I think that we're going to have a human level performance on most, if not all, professional tasks. So white collar work where you're sitting down at a computer, either being, a lawyer or an accountant or a project manager or a marketing person. Most of those tasks will be fully automated by an AI within the next 12 to 18 months. And we can see this in software engineering. Many software engineers report that they are now using AI-assisted coding for the vast majority of their code production, which means that their roles shifted now to this meta function of debugging, scrutinizing, of doing the strategic stuff like architecting, of, et cetera, putting things into production. So it's a quite different relationship to the technology. And that's happened in the last 6 months.
Okay, so, things are changing fast. And you can see where those grounding values and then, again, creativity and being flexible in this world is so important. So, just the fact of it's overwhelming in a way, just all the changes that are happening so fast. So what's the best thing we can do to prepare our kids? Let them play in a context of real compassion and consciousness and humility and wisdom. The picture I took of Javier. So imagine in this video, this is an individual training, but people had to create this software for them to train from. And actually, you're seeing a lot of engineers using these things to use robots, whereas you might have a dangerous situation, you don't want a human in there. So, yeah. Okay, you get the idea. But this is what we see them playing with, right? They are mastering these devices that are the tools that they could very well be using and programming and modifying and doing all those things with. So, yeah, the level of understanding AI, that's one of the biggest things you hear experts saying is become very familiar with AI, whatever that might mean, and how to use it responsibly. We are facilitating that within the space really on a daily basis with these kids. And they talk about AI all the time as far as having issues with it or the ethical problems with it and whatnot. So before we do questions briefly here, just want to close with this because I think it kind of encapsulates what we're going for here.
Allow them to play and explore, and they'll be just fine. So that's kind of my parenting philosophy. It's like a plant. You water it, right? Sometimes you forget, but you water it again and make it better. But it's all the same, right? We're growing humans and we just want to grow good humans. And imagine if the world was full of good humans who got to do what they loved for most of the time in their childhood and teen years. This would be a very different world.
Okay, with that, are there any questions or comments about all of what we covered? It was quite a bit.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm curious, and this has been on my mind since my son has been a part of the Grove. I don't know, nobody here I don't think really knows me, but I'm Buck's mom. My son is high on the spectrum, and he is a lot like Jesse. Those two are they're tight, best friends. And I'm curious, Paul, you know my experience with having both my boys in public education compared to now, what Buck's been in there for a month. Be going on a little over a month now. The changes that I have seen in my son from what I call the humanistic approach to learning are huge. Like, I never thought that I would see my son doing as well as he's doing. Do you see a shift as quickly as what, say, a person like me is seeing in my sons, plural, because now I got both my sons there? What kind of shifts do you see in these children as you're moving about in this process of learning and creating and just everything that you're doing there? I'm really interested in knowing what you see unfolding with some of these kids, because you're seeing them from the beginning and then you're seeing them from week to week. So you must be seeing a transition.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just goes to when you follow, I think what, in the sense of following what we know best about human development and science, and keep that focus, it'll take care of itself, so to speak, in a way. I love this picture because it just shows kind of what you're speaking to. And I think we can forget, I even forget with my own child, the value, just because, we're in a culture that's very different. So I think when we go out and about, we hear a lot of conversations of a lot of performative stuff, like what's your kid doing? What's the reading level? What things are they achieving as of today? And it can be hard to speak to. I think when your kid's in it for a while, it can be easy to kind of notice those shifts and changes that when they're coming out of a certain environment, and these are for particular kids, not all kids, but for many kids, when they come out of a certain environment and into one that I agree, I think it's more conducive for human development, you do see massive changes. And I think it goes to show that, a lot of humans deep down want to do good and want to participate in meaningful ways for others and themselves within a community. But, I think I like this picture a lot because it just speaks to just the power of the model as far as, the amount of engagement and joy these kids have on a daily basis. And so, yeah, if they were in a situation where they didn't feel connected or had the freedom to do things they wanted to, you're going to see a drastic change for sure. Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap this up? And I actually have a couple things upcoming too, as far as things to briefly mention.
I'm curious how many of the other parents who are attending this evening have experienced some of what I had shared about. I asked this because, I know science. I was actually a school teacher for the school district here and in another state, but I also have my behavioral psychology degree. I have never in my life seen this type of learning take such a quick hold of my sons, namely my autistic child. I've never seen it. And I did my teaching internships at Waldorf and Montessori. I'm interested in knowing if any of the other parents here had such a quick positive fluctuation in behaviors, in the learning, in mannerisms, anything like that, or I'm really interested in finding out if anybody else experienced that. If anybody would please clue me in.
Well, I'm actually a volunteer, and in some of the pictures, you see my daughter Kate in there. And there's been a huge growth, like with her being in this space. She interacts with the older kids, the younger kids, and, well, I mean, older kids to all of her, but like the fluctuation in the mid-age, she will interact with them, and they have done like a game where like some of the older kids, like 12, 13-year-olds will like run away from her, and it's like a tickle tag game of like she's chasing after them, and then they'll kind of chase after her, and they're able to interact and collaborate. And even my time as a volunteer, I've seen like a huge growth and change with all of the kids and how they have their growth and transition with everything. So, and like even the short amount of time with Buck is just incredible, and Jethro, and seeing their growth and how interested they are and how they integrated so quickly has just been such a journey. So.
Yeah, I think we don't. The thing is, we don't just overemphasize academic intelligence, because we know that there are like 27 different types of intelligence, which we provide space to foster what you're referring to there. I think that was Lyndon. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, that kind of physical play, chasing, is just one form of intelligence among the many that is emphasized here. This intrapersonal and interpersonal, existential intelligence. I mean, they're talking about meaning in life and culture and politics and so on. Emotional intelligence, relational social intelligence. So because there's an awareness that kids are more than just one-dimensional, we don't focus on just behavior and trying to fix the behavior, because we know there's something more profound in the child that makes the child human. And it's something that is addressed throughout the growth as we are observing. And I hope that you get or have gotten a glimpse into how we see human connection, the human condition or human interaction differently. And I hope that you understand, because we've said before, we don't discipline kids because we don't need to, because there's an overemphasis on the many other forms of intelligence that allow the child to develop a greater sense of self and self in relation to other people and their environment. So there's no need to manipulate behaviors, no need to punish a child, when so much of our engagement is already shaping the child's perspective of himself. And the expectation of how to act and behave is modeled through the way we present ourselves, the way we act, the way we talk to them, the way we gaze at them. We provide, for example, gaze, smiling eyes when we see them. It's utter and complete joy. And it doesn't matter what the child's doing. Or smiling ears. We listen very carefully with joy. Anyway.
We'll be reaching out and setting up a parent-teacher conference check-in. We'd like to speak individually about what we've been observing with your kid. And so we'll be setting that up as well. So if you have any questions that you weren't able to ask tonight, you can bring those to those. And so,
hey, sorry, Paul, to interrupt you. I just wanted to say, I see, from behind the scenes how much effort and time and passion and all of those things from you and Dr. Tran and all the volunteers. And so just expressing gratitude for all of that, because all of those things that you were just speaking on at the school wouldn't be possible. So we're grateful.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, we will sign off. So thanks again for coming, and we will talk to you soon.